A very good morning and welcome to your news analysis program, Media Monitor. I am your host, Alicia Jali. Here's a taste of what's coming up in today's installment of the show. We kick off our show by looking at the week it was and stories that trended on social and digital media. The past week's U.S. terror alert stayed with us. We zoom in at the two statements that caused quite controversy. The history of U.S. presidential race changed when Hillary Clinton became the very first female presidential nominee. A preview of June 16 commemorations as we look at the role that the NYDA plays in assisting young people to becoming financially independent. South African firefighters also took to the streets of Canada, raising more questions than answers, though, about their wage agreements. But now it's time for the news headlines at 900 hours Central African time. South Africans should brace themselves for freezing temperatures in most of the country's interior from today. There'll be more in the snow in mountainous areas this week, and the rain's expected in Gauteng, Northwest and KwaZulu-Natal. Police are investigating the murder of a former high-profile SABC board member and TV personality, Ms. Hope Zinde, a former TV and radio presenter, as well as a non-executive member of the SABC board until 2015, was found murdered at her home. And looking at your sports news, F1 champion Lewis Hamilton of Mercedes will start in pole position for today's Canadian Grand Prix out in Montreal. He will be joined, of course, by teammate and championship leader Nico Rosberg on the front row. All right, and welcoming our guest this morning, of course, you'll get used to her. It is Ms. Ntswaki Shweshwe, our SABC producer, who is joining us for the social media review. And of course, on the main discussion table is social commentator Mr. Tebogo Ditsejo, making a U-turn. He is the CEO at Ditsejo Media, as well as Mr. Brooks Spector, first time in studio, and he is the associate editor at Daily Maverick. Gentlemen, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning.
Good morning.
All right. Let's start with you, Ntswaki. Good morning to you too.
Good morning, Alicia, and good morning to everyone that's watching us from home.
What got you busy this week in terms of digital media?
So there's been a lot of conversations this week. We saw the Euro 2016 starting, the US terror alert, which you mentioned.
Yes.
But let's start with Stephen Keshi. So on Wednesday morning, we woke up to the news that the Super Eagles coach and the Nigerian football superstar, Stephen Keshi, passed on at the age of 54. And the Nigerian Football Federation tweeted, "We can never forget the big boss, hashtag rest in peace. Rest in peace, Stephen Keshi." And you have Dumelo here saying the death of Stephen Keshi is a blow to African football. He was a great footballer and coach. May his soul rest in peace. Now, while Nigerians were still looking at the passing away of Stephen Keshi, there was another blow. We have this 6 times coach for the Super Eagles. He also coached Orlando Pirates. Thabiso Sithole, SABC sports reporter there,
yes,
saying former Orlando Pirates coach Shaibu Amadu passes away just days after his countryman, Stephen Keshi. And we have the Nigerian president also tweeting there, "This is indeed a sad week for Nigerian football and Nigerian sports in general. May the soul of Amadu Shaibu rest in peace."
It was generally a very sad week in sport, with Muhammad Ali also being laid to rest. So rest in peace to all three of them. Thank you for that, Ntswaki. What else made digital news headlines this week?
Okay, now you remember Penny Sparrow at the beginning of the year,
yes,
a big stir on the social media platform after she posted a post on Facebook likening black beach goers to monkeys. And this week, the Equality Court fined her 150,000 rands.
The first of its kind, or the highest of its kind, I hear?
The first of its kind. We'll see how it goes. So the court has also ordered that this matter be referred for criminal prosecution. So we'll see how it goes. And Arts and Culture Minister here, Nathi Mthethwa, saying the Penny Sparrow ruling serves as a warning to those who perpetuate racism that there will be serious consequences for their actions. And Justin Limp Law saying that Penny Sparrow fine was a mistake. it ought to have been community services. Racism is a sickness of the heart and cannot be paid out. So we'll see how that one goes, obviously waiting to hear if this matter will indeed be referred for criminal prosecution. And also this week in Accra, we saw the floods, and you remember parts of Accra, which is the capital city of Ghana, is very prone to floods. And this is the real view of what people were tweeting of what was happening in Accra. So far, the fatalities that have been reported have not been as bad as the ones we saw last year when 150 people lost their lives. So you saw a lot of these roads flooded, offices also flooded, and so we'll see how that one goes. Of course, Ghanaians blaming the politicians for it, and we saw one here tweeting that actually this is not a political matter. That was Sunshine Girl saying, "Trust me, this is not a political issue, because honestly, I'm still not sure who can take us out of this quagmire." So we'll see how that one goes.
But how is, the Ghanaian government dealing with this? Do you know, Ntswaki, in terms of the feedback that you got? Are they totally ignoring what happens during these floods?
So what happened following this flooding is that the Ghanaian government started building drainage systems. Now what happens is these drainage systems have been blocked, and no one is out to remove the silt from the drains. So we'll see how it goes, whether it's the role of the citizens, especially those in Ghana, Accra, to remove the dirt from the drains, or whether the government has to be removing those. So we'll see how that one goes.
And very quickly, last but not least, of course, we cannot leave without saying and paying tribute to former SABC News anchor.
Yes, and the former SABC News board member,
yes.
SABC, the corporation board member. So news came out yesterday that her body was found in a boot of her car in her home in Hartbeespoort Dam. So we'll see how the story develops. So far, what we know is that the police are saying that they have a 25-year-old, or rather a 28-year-old son in custody, and they have questioned him. And there's a lot of tributes coming in. Zwelinzi Mavavi saying that Hope Zinde belonged to a league of her own, principled to the core, hated corruption, full of love, and respected all.
Ntswaki, we're going to leave it there for this week, but thank you so much for all your hard work here on Media Monitor. Ntswaki Shweshwe Crew on the Digital News. All right, gentlemen, a good morning to you once again. Would you like to elaborate on any story that piqued your interest in terms of the digital news that we just saw with our digital media expert there? Let's start with you, Brooks. Welcome to the show.
It's good to be with you. All those stories are interesting. I'm always fascinated by the way in which a story rises quickly, and almost as if there's a clock at the bottom. And in this case, I think the penny sparrow one strikes me as interesting, partly because it's more local, and partly because it's making new law, in effect. The judges in this case, or the judge in this case, chose to make a particular kind of decision that set out a fence, set out a base mark for similar kinds of judgments like this in the future, in a way which up till this moment really hadn't happened. Now, whether you agree with the decision in terms of the punishment or not, it almost doesn't matter, because the judge has decided that there is a tangible harm and therefore a tangible punishment. And then the question becomes, what sort of appeals can be made? And second, once the penalty is paid, or the appeal is successful.
Does it address the issue?
Well, that's the second question. Does it address the issue more generally? And once that's over, is the table clear for her going forward?
Brooks, I want to hear from
I don't have answers to any of those, but I think they're worth asking.
Yeah, definitely. Tebogo, what do you say to that?
Well, I think in terms of the penny sparrow matter, it's good to see Minister Nathi Mthethwa coming out, and saying that there will be serious consequences for the actions of people who perpetuate racism. And if you look at the precedents which has been said, the Equality Court is there for us to get social justice. And the way that it's set up is that it's inexpensive, it's informal, and it's very easy for you to submit your forms. So people on the ground who experience racism or unfair prejudice are able to get justice. And we've had cases previously where somebody was called the K word, and they were able to get the person and the perpetrator to serve 2 years house arrest and also 70 hours in community service. And so because the complainant in this case just asked for 200,000 rand fine, that is the reason Penny Sparrow got a 150,000 rand fine. But it has been referred for further investigation, and the NPA will decide whether or not to lay criminal charges on Penny Sparrow.
As Brooks put it there is now something tangible that is actually attached. I think things are going to start to change. We're going to take a very quick ad break, and when we return, of course, Tebogo Ditsejo as well as Brooks will share their insights on topical stories of the week. Do stay with us.
To see tonight, but we are all standing under a glass ceiling right now. But don't worry, we're not smashing this one. Thanks to you, we've reached a milestone. The first time in our nation's history that a woman will be a major party's nominee for President of the United States.
Did you go to heaven?
Kelvin is the one who created all this.
What are you fighting over? Us?
If there is 10 million in my account, it will be in the front page the next day.
Do you have 10 million?
Oh, Jesus, hold my hand. Hallelujah.
It's happening right here on Question Time today.
Monday to Thursday at 5:30 p.m. on the SABC News Channel.
Welcome back to Media Monitor. Remember, you can interact with us on our Twitter handle, which is at SA Media Monitor. Let's get your views on our topics. Today with me is, of course, social media commentator, Mr. Tebogo Ditsejo. He is the CEO at Ditsejo Media, as well as Mr. Brooks Spector, and he works for the Daily Maverick. Now, last week, we touched on the terror alert by the U.S. Embassy a day after the story broke. However, the story took an unprecedented twist this week when the Department of International Relations and Security Clusters issued a joint statement that's been deemed as undiplomatic. The presidency, shortly after that, issued a rather decent diplomatic statement. The difference of the tone between the two statements, however, continued to dominate headlines for most of the week. Let's listen in on this clip.
I want to emphasize again the United States Embassy issued a statement, which I'm sure you have seen it, that reiterates the same sentiment about the cordial relations between the U.S. and the South African government, and we are continuing on those matters in economic, political, social, as well as on security matters. And lastly, the security cluster of ministers, I'm sure from time to time will be appraising the South African public on the state of our readiness for any matters that relates to the safety of South Africans or anybody who resides within the borders of the Republic of South Africa.
You know what I found interesting was that last week one of my guests actually highlighted something very important in relation to these terror alerts, and that a state of panic shouldn't be caused, particularly if there wasn't sufficient facts. I want to hear your views. Let's start with you, Debo.
Yeah, this is a very interesting diplomatic issue that we're faced with in terms of our security, because it's very personal, and it deals with people who will be going around their daily activities, shopping and, getting stuff for their personal needs. And unfortunately, we don't want to be in a situation where there's a state of panic and people are now scared to go to public places because there's an escalation or a security threat. But what I think happened is that the United States issued a security alert, and then it was characterized as a terror threat. And those are two different issues. A security alert means you should just watch out. A terror threat is something very different. And I think the response from our government, particularly the presidency, was very good, and it's diplomatic. And it does show that we are committed to having cordial relations with the U.S. Embassy. But I think in future, we need to be very specific and look at how we evaluate information that we receive, and not to splash, big headlines on the front pages saying terror attack is coming, because that creates panic and it can impact on our businesses and also tourism.
Brooks?
Well, I mean, as Teboho says, the first thing to understand is that it wasn't a terror alert. It was an alert about a security issue. The Department of International Relations and Cooperation and State Security went full steam ahead, waving their arms effectively, metaphorically, claiming that somebody is falsely painting the story of terror. It took a day before the presidency and the cabinet said, whoa, time out. In the meantime, the panic that ensued in the minds of some people came from the disjuncture between those two statements. The better way to handle it would have been if somebody in the government in the first place had said, we understand that the U.S. government has made this security alert available on their website. Be assured we are in close coordination with the United States and other countries, and we are taking all measures appropriate and necessary to make sure that your safety is secured. And if they had done that, they would not have had to have the second version issued from the cabinet. And they would not have had to be in the position of trying to put out a fire where there hadn't been one in the first place. And the real problem is you have to be extremely careful with the way in which you deal with the message you're trying to deliver, rather than simply saying, oh my goodness, a terror alert. If, for example, the U.S. government had issued a traveler's advisory, that's a very different category of things. That says in country X or Y or Z, there is a coup that has taken place, there are civil insurrections, there are rebellions, there are fires, floods, earthquakes, whatever it might be. It's a sharp, imminent moment of difficulty. And I mean, any given moment, there are a number of security alerts on websites from the U.S. government around the world, and even a few travelers' advisories, because the world is a complicated place.
Teboho, this also brings me to my next point. I think you've both touched on it. I mean, I found it interesting that after the State Security Agency had actually released the first statement that there shouldn't be panic, certain media reports were still stating that the department was downplaying or dismissing the facts. I mean, how crucial is it for media to then portray the right message when it comes to such issues?
It's very important. And if you look at Media 24, they did a great job on the day when the terror alert was trending on Twitter. Even though it's not a terror alert, it was a security alert. And they went and digged deep into the issue, looked at different sources, and they came up with a theory that perhaps this was based on a source in Kenya, of which has been discredited, but that was one side of the story. Obviously, you need to report on the story in its entirety.
Absolutely.
But it is very dangerous for you now to take a security issue and use it to sell your papers. That is not something that we need, because you need to look at what is in the public's interest versus what is in the interest of selling more papers or getting more clicks for some of your
And
stories.
you did mention earlier on, I don't think people realize just what a huge effect on the economy, business, as well as the country's functionality, such reporting can actually do to the country. But let's take a look at what you're saying at home on your Twitter. Norbert Mkize says, hatred by super countries against RSA. They angry that President Zuma made a friendship with Arabs, their enemies. Mvuleni says, very seriously, because no country is immune to terror attacks. And last but not least on this topic, Busisiwe J. Mokwena says, they envy our peace and security, so now they want to destabilize our country. Some of your views there coming through on Twitter. We're going to take another quick ad break, and when we return, we're going to look at the biggest headlines that dominated international media this week. This is Media Monitor.
We've deployed 3.5 billion rand of incentives over the last few years to support the clothing textile competitiveness program. What we've learned from this is that we've had in the DTI incentive basket, we've had a few sector-specific programs like the motor program, like the clothing program, like the film program, like the business process service programs, and then we've had generic incentives like the manufacturing competitiveness enhancement program. And I think we think that our programs have worked better where we've had sector-specific programs.
One other person has been shot dead and another is in a critical condition in hospital.
The CRL has laid charges against controversial televangelist Paseka Motsoeneng.
More than 1.3 million South Africans have been added in the past two registration weekends.
The International Monetary Fund warns that policy uncertainty could dampen economic growth in South Africa.
And all eyes are on the new BOK coach, Alistair Coetzee. He's challenged to keep everyone in the country happy.
Welcome back to Media Monitor. Now, dominating international media headlines this week is, of course, Hillary Clinton's historic victory. The former United States Secretary of State made history this week when she became the very first female U.S. presidential nominee. Among those who have since come out to endorse her campaign are, of course, President Barack Obama and even her former rival, Bernie Sanders. She expressed gratitude of President Obama's endorsement. Here's more on this clip.
Absolutely a joy and an honor that President Obama and I, over the years, have gone from fierce competitors to true friends. I was so pleased and surprised when he asked me to be Secretary of State, and we worked on everything from fighting terrorism to preventing the spread of nuclear weapons to climate change negotiations, to obviously the bin Laden operation. And through it all, my esteem for him just kept growing, and it means the world to me to know that he has my back in this election. He has been very supportive over the past 15 or so months, and it's a great opportunity for us to campaign together in the general election, just as we did in 2008 when he was running.
Brooks, let's start with you. I mean, you crafted a very nice piece on Clinton's victory. What fascinates you the most, though, about the very latest developments and her journey towards this fierce race with Donald Trump now?
Well, I mean, what I think is truly fascinating, divided into two halves. The first part was that it took her so long to beat back an unlikely challenger. The good news for her in that is that it has finally sharpened her message. It has made her a crisper, clearer candidate than she would have been had it been a simple kind of coronation that it looked like it might have been a year ago. If you remember her speech a week or so ago in San Diego, where she tore a stripe off of Donald Trump's back for his views, that was the Hillary Clinton that has to be heard over and over again for the next 150 days, because it was an unemotional, fact-filled, absolutely crisp and clean explanation of why he is temperamentally unsuited for the presidency. And that is the issue she has to pound away at, the temperamental unsuitability of her opponent. On the other hand, Donald Trump, a neophyte in politics, truly, astounded every commentator and every analyst in the country, as well as beyond, including myself, in succeeding in the Republican Party against 16 other more polished, professional, and experienced politicians with a message that was profoundly different, which is, you, my friends, the voters, have not been heard properly. And I am going to be your voice. And that resonated with 20 to 30% of the actual electorate, but that was enough for him to score victory after victory within the more limited confines of Republican primaries. Whether it will be enough in the general election, whole different question.
But look, I want us to speak to this. I mean, I think when Obama was also in the race, a new dimension of campaign was brought about, the first black leader, and now Hillary Clinton, the first female. Do you think that these structures were then fair? I mean, can we say Bernie Sanders move out the way of history and not even look at who'd be actually better suited to lead the country, Debo?
Well, U.S. politics are very interesting. I mean, you had George Bush as president, and then 10 years later, his son is the president. And then before him was Bill Clinton was the president, and 15 years later, his wife is the president.
Almost the president.
She's about to be the president. And it's very interesting, and it makes me appreciate South African politics even more, because if you look at the party politics in the United States and the structure, you've got about 15% in the Democrats who are superdelegates. These are people who are not elected from, what we would call the branches into the national convention, and they are able to sway it, towards the candidate that they want. And if you look at these elections, it clearly shows that the people in the United States are quite tired of having the established candidates, continuously winning. And that is why you see Donald Trump has managed to do well. But if you look at the media coverage, it is also a bit concerning. There was a study that came out, released by the Washington Post, which revealed that Hillary Clinton had way more coverage than Bernie Sanders. In fact, Bernie Sanders only had 10% of the coverage Hillary Clinton got. But then Hillary Clinton only had 50% of the coverage that Donald Trump got. And so it makes you wonder whether or not it is media coverage is in the public's interest or in the interest of getting viewers. And so also the discussion, if you look at the discussion, it's more around the issues around the candidates. So their body language, their temperament. But what about the policy issues?
Absolutely.
These issues are not being touched on enough.
Very quickly, Bruce.
Well, I mean, two things. First of all, the superdelegates aren't some anonymous group of people who descend out of the heavens. They are, after all, elected officials for the most part. They're people who have already faced an electorate and won. And it seems to me reasonably fair to include them in the process. You can make an argument that Donald Trump wouldn't have been the candidate if the Republicans had superdelegates too. Of course, elected party officials would have recoiled in horror at the possibility and may have formed a more cohesive a group of antagonists against him. The question of Donald Trump and the media, it's been fascinating. Most of it has been a political version of the old media adage, if it bleeds, it leads. Donald Trump was the most fascinating, although horrifying, person in politics for the last year and a half, and as a result, he benefited enormously from this fixation.
So it was also some sort of a campaign attack, so to say, Brooks.
Well, I mean, he understood the media, and he understood how to fiddle with their minds.
Absolutely.
And it wasn't as if they sat down one morning and said, "Let's give Donald Trump 3 times the coverage." He got inside their heads. He did his magic. And the cameras gravitated to him like a large gravity-filled body.
Brooks, thank you so much for joining us this morning. That is Mr. Brooks Spector. He is the associate editor from the Daily Maverick, and he was joining us on those 2 particular issues. We now bid farewell to him. After the break, we ask how our youth has benefited from the struggles of the historic generation of 1976, when unemployment among youth has reached a critical condition. NYDA Senior Manager will sit with us on this discussion. You don't want to miss that.
Even Fitch, just a few hours ago, announced that they are not going to dump us into junk status. They are going to retain us where we are, but they're also going to say we are stable, because we are stable, and we need to act like that. We must recognize young people as dynamic agents of change who are capable of finding diverse, innovative, and creative solutions to problems. We must encourage innovation and entrepreneurship.
One other person has been shot dead and another is in a critical condition in hospital.
The CRL has laid charges against controversial televangelist Paseka Motsoeneng.
More than 1.3 million South Africans have been added in the past 2 registration weekends.
The International Monetary Fund warns that policy uncertainty could dampen economic growth in South Africa.
And all eyes are on the new Bok coach, Alistair Coetzee, who's challenged to keep everyone in the country happy.
Welcome back to Media Monitor. Now we are still recapping the topical issues of the week, and with me now is NYDA Senior Manager Mr. Makome Tlaleane and social media commentator Mr. Tebogo Ditshego. So a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
All right. Well, the country will commemorate 40 years of Soweto youth uprisings, also known as June 16 on Thursday, under the theme Moving the South African Youth Forward. Young people are making use of the various platforms given to them in their month to express their frustrations. Here's more on this clip.
A lot of students graduate from institutions of higher learning and can't find jobs. Some of us can't get into institutions of higher learning. The problem of financial aid and certain things like that are holding us back as the youth to getting opportunities.
I'm stuck with my degree and my diploma. I'm struggling to have work and I'm sitting at home doing nothing. So I could love to have employment at the moment and then further my studies.
I do support entrepreneurship, but I think the government that needs to come through is a government that should support small businesses, because currently what's happening is that we have government, but government does little in terms of providing advice or bringing solutions into the table for young people and assisting them in terms of business growth.
Malcolm, I think listening to that, and also I think the biggest eye-opener this week in the news was, of course, the youth in Uppington and Kwaggafontein literally laying their challenges bare, stating how unemployment leads to issues like drug and alcohol abuse. I mean, the NYDA has been there for quite some time, but it just seems that the youth does not know how to access their help. What could be lacking here, sir?
The main challenge could be that NYDA has in 9 provinces offices. We have offices in 9 provinces. We have offices with municipalities. So the challenge could be information availability to young people to know where to find us. And for them, it could be true that we are not in all municipalities. That is true. But we are working with local government to make sure that in all municipal offices there is NYDA presence in collaboration with local government. So that's work in progress. We will get there.
Tebogo, I mean, I know you're always on social media and are very clued up on some of the youth matters. What is the youth needing to take their ideas forward according to your knowledge? Where is the pitfall? I know a lot of young people also write to you directly asking for such information about where they can put their ideas forward.
Yeah, I think we need to applaud our government for institutionalizing youth issues and creating the NYDA. And I think as the public, we need to now provide positive information and constructive criticism so that they can take the youth issues forward. For an example, it is important for the NYDA to get more funding. They need more resources so that they can spread these resources to the people. Without a substantive budget, there's not much you can do. And what young people need is access to resources so that they can do what they need to do. Apply for jobs, which there is that grant that is coming forth for young people to be able to deal with administrative issues, but also to start businesses, to get access to land or office space in order for them to start their businesses and to be funded adequately. And I think from an entrepreneurship perspective, what I've currently seen is that in South Africa, there is not necessarily a culture of taking risks and investing in businesses.
Yes.
And that is not just from the government's perspective. It is also from the private sector perspective. Because if you look at the United States and other countries like South Korea, you have a situation where startups are being funded both by the public sector and by the private sector. So we need to create our own Silicon Valleys in our country so that young people can start their businesses, try and fail their ideas, but more importantly, become the reality that we want to see in future of a country which is innovative and globally competitive.
Malcolm, I think you spoke about it earlier on when we heard the clips from the young people there, that there seems to be a challenge in terms of the information that the youth lack in terms of how they can get access to the NYDA. But let's talk about tangible projects now and solutions that young people at home that are watching this show right now can actively get involved in order to better their lives. We know that not everyone has access to higher education, but let's give them some hope so that they don't sit at home and start doing drugs and alcohol.
Certainly. I think government in setting up the NYDA gave us a clear mandate from government to say to us that we should respond to the challenges that face young people in this country. We have programs to date that engage young people through the grant program. The grant program is financing of youth businesses, where young people walk into our offices. They can get anything from 1,000 rand to 100,000 per person to set up businesses, and they don't pay it back, so it's a grant. We have programs that, so before they get the grant, we enable them to get capacity to be able to run viable businesses. So through the EDP program, which is the Enterprise Development Program, we train them, we give them tools, we give them networks so that they run sustainable, successful businesses. We have programs through Solomon Mahlangu Scholarship Program where we enable, I think one of the young persons there say that they can't afford to get into higher education.
Absolutely.
Our response has been setting up the Solomon Mahlangu Scholarship where over 300 young people have access to higher education. We enable young people, as you will see, one of the clips that just got passed now, through government, where we enable young people to set up businesses in the construction sector with human settlements. This month we are going to hand over 40 houses in the Northwest built by young people themselves. So we give them skills in construction, where they can then be able to set up small businesses where they can employ other young people. And the point that Mr. Disseho said, where he said that the private sector should come on board, is an important one. It's a critical one because as government we can only do so much. So we work as government. We've set up platforms where through the IDC and CIFA, those that want a business financing that is above 100,000, we mentor them. And when their business requires, say, R1 million, we then hand them over to CIFA to get finance. So there's a value chain there that enables young people to be able to participate.
Makoma, let me put you on the spot very quickly. I know we're out of time, but where can people like that are watching this show today, what can they log on to? Where do they go? Who do they call? Please give us those details.
They can go on to the NYDA website. We are on Twitter. We are on Facebook. They can call our hotline 0860. I forget the number now. But we are on the website. All the details our contact details are on the website, and we are in all provinces, in all major cities. In some of the small cities, we are there. They must come to us and talk to us. We have products that are ready for them.
All right, and you will engage with them, whatever the idea they might have.
Indeed.
All right, well, thank you so much, sir, for that. Speaking of Twitter, here's what some people at home are saying. Mzansi Autonomy says, it's unfortunate the youth of 76 that is in leadership today are the ones who oppress the youth of today. Mbuso Hlangu says RMF, yet the youth of 2015 equals MFF equals RMF is demonized exactly like the 1976 were. Look now. Wandile Ngeba says it's very difficult for young people, especially those living in rural areas. No jobs, but government should assist though or through entrepreneurship. Tonzi says, of course, because our pool now has to cater for much more, unlike that of 1976. Makum, I think I know we're going to break very quickly, but I mean those people that don't have access in the rural areas, like one of our people on Twitter has mentioned, where do they go? Do they go directly to your offices?
Yes, they go directly to the offices. All municipalities invariably have information on us. So each municipality has a youth desk. Those youth desks should have information about how to access us. So it's work in progress, but we are winning it. So we are available in all youth offices of municipalities. We have our own full-fledged offices where they can talk to us.
All right.
They can contact us through Twitter, and we'll get back to them.
All right. Well, youth, I hope you heard that. We're going to take a very quick ad break, and after that, the South African firefighters down tools in Canada over contractual disagreements. We'll get more analysis on this after this break. Thank you so much, sir.
Let us find a way that is going to make all of us feel we own it as we do, and we are making a contributions collectively to make it an instrument that benefits all countries. That is the objective of all members of SACU, that we should make SACU one of the instruments that must change the quality of lives of our people. We are looking, for an example, one of the important areas, the industrialization of all the countries, to grow the economies in all the countries, so that all countries, there is no country that is left behind. All countries are economically empowered.
Welcome back. Now, President Jacob Zuma has instructed the Department of Environmental Affairs and International Relations to intervene in the wage dispute of South African firefighters who went to Canada to assist in containing foul fires, but who have since downed their tools over pay disputes. And of course, for this debate, we're now joined by Mr. Albie Modise, who is the Chief Director of Communications from the Department of Environmental Affairs. Albie, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Alicia. Good morning.
Maybe, Albie, let's first understand what was the initial agreement between the firefighters and the Canadian government there?
Look, a bit of background would be important with this one.
Absolutely.
Remember that we run the Extended Public Works Program as government.
Yes.
One of the areas that we run the program in is in the space of getting young people who are not employed from marginalized communities who don't have skills to be drawn into the EPWP. And Working on Fire is one of those programs, which is run by an agency that has been appointed by government to ensure that all of the activities related to skills acquisition by young people, but also protection of the environment, that all of those are executed. So the Working on Fire as an implementing agency had an agreement with the Canadians on this matter, which is why at the very beginning of the whole story, it's largely been Working on Fire. But of course, with the intervention by the President on this matter, Minister Molewa has taken over leadership on this matter to say we will ensure that going forward we address this issue. Hence, the Minister has deployed a mediator on the ground in Canada as I'm talking to you right now.
But what were the issues regarding the wage disputes? I mean, we read various reports about pay, getting less pay instead of the amount that the Canadian government was actually paying out to them. Please, tell us the truth here, sir.
It's the report that Minister is asking from Working on Fire, because remember, as I mentioned earlier, the agreement at this point is between the implementing agency and the Canadian implementing agency. So the Minister has asked for, firstly, that Mr. Trevor Abrahams from the Working on Fire to go to Canada to mediate in this particular standoff. But secondly, she sought a report from the Working on Fire implementing agency about the conditions that led to young people, or most of the firefighters on the ground in Canada, going on strike. But also in the main, also in the statement we released this morning, the Minister makes it very clear that it's important that at all times when agreements of this nature are arrived at, there are clear terms of references and agreements between the implementing agency as well as the firefighters, so that there's clarity in terms of the expectations on the ground, but also for the nation to realize the fact that these are not your normal firefighters. These are young people drawn from marginalized communities and inducted into the program with a view to impart skills, but at the same time to fight fires, as we do with other programs like Working for Water and all of the different programs. But of course, it doesn't justify the allegations that we've been hearing of possible exploitation. And Minister makes it very clear that it's important that at all times we respect the rights of South Africans deployed in different parts of the world, even at home as well.
Tebogo, we're just talking about Youth Month and how, youth can try to find other ways of, bettering their lives. How important is then for media to look at the positive aspect, like Albie was mentioning, that this is a development project that the government has embarked upon?
I think this is a very powerful story.
Absolutely. But we're not getting both sides of that story.
We're not. But if you look at it goes against the narrative of an African country that is going out to go and protect a Western country, a first world country, Canada. And I think that it's a brilliant story to tell. There was a lot of media coverage around it, and I think the firefighters were celebrated. But now that there's a dispute, obviously that seems to have reversed the gains that were made in this great story to tell. And I think if we look at it, perhaps it is because of the urgency of the situation that it was not possible to induct everyone around what is the expectations. And perhaps it could have, we can look at a situation where if it is an emergency and if there's not much time to do induction, perhaps we should do it at the airport, inside the flight, so that everybody is aware and we agree that, look, guys, we've signed this agreement. This is what you're going to be getting. And please, if you have any objectives, please raise them now. But it's a very difficult situation because it was an emergency.
Albie.
Alicia, true. I mean, one of the things that Minister has requested is that we need to have a clear MOU between South Africa and Canada on this particular matter, because there's a country-to-country level of agreement that we need to arrive at first. And then you need to have an agreement between agency to agency, which is the agency working on fire and the agency they're working with in Canada, so that those MOUs begin to unpack and explain the key areas of agreement, but also the expectations of the implementing agencies involved, so that when you have a stand of this nature, you're able to revert to your agreement to say, this is what we had agreed to, this is what we need to do. And I think we've learned our lessons. The minister is very clear that we will make sure that as we engage with the Canadians going forward, because we expect that other countries will also seek assistance from South Africa. Last year, the very same firefighters were sent to Canada to fight fires in Canada. So it's a program that's doing exceedingly well, getting young people in with no skills at all, train them from poor communities where they stood no chance at all of getting inducted into the mainstream of the economy. Skills they get from those deployments would stand them in good stead when they get employment, for example.
So you would
in big
encourage
metros.
such projects?
Absolutely. We'll encourage such programs. And indeed, they benefit immensely as young people. It's skills that are not only about work, but it's also about improving themselves in terms of their ability to really stand their own and to be able to get into the market.
It is Youth Month. Thank you so much. I'll be Mr. Modise. He is the Chief Director of Communications from the Department of Environmental Affairs. I'd also like to thank Mr. Tebogo Ditsejo, and thank you for watching Media Monitor. We hope that you will join us again next week, same time and place. That is right here on the SABC News channel. From myself, Alicia Jali, and the rest of the team, this is SABC News. Have a great Sunday.